conferences, but hopefully we can start in a few minutes' time when people are pouring in now. So should we start? Yeah. A very warm welcome to everyone. My name is Terje Carlsson. I'm the chairman of the Swedish Association of Investigative Journalism. I'll be moderating this panel discussion, which is a great honor for me. Myself, been working throughout the Middle East for approximately, 10, 12 years, mostly covering Israel-Palestine, but I've been traveling quite a bit throughout the other countries in the Middle East. We have a panel here with some really interesting journalists that are active working in this area. In this seminar, we will talk specifically on Daesh, ISIS, ISIL, IS, whatever you want to call this extremist group. We will try to answer and discuss a few stories that have been outlined and that is in the program. And hopefully, at the end of this session, we can invite the audience to take part in the discussion. Although I know that when you have discussions about the Middle East, I know that people have very strong opinions about, how journalists can do their work, what we should be reporting on. So I do ask the audience to, stay calm and try, even if you completely disagree with the stuff that are being said here, we'll try to have a nice discussion, not too tempered. But again, I know this is a topic that will have some emotions and reactions, but in the end of the seminar, you will be able to ask short questions. So please remember that. The purpose, though, with this the panel discussion and this seminar is to really try to understand if it's possible to do investigative journalism and reporting when covering groups like Daesh. And hopefully we can learn more about the methods that people are using while trying to report about this group. And hopefully people will walk away from here feeling inspired and gaining new knowledge from some of these people that have a lot of experience in the field. We will give each speaker time to explain their background and their experiences, and I think we will start with you, Hanan. Okay. So can you please introduce yourself, and we will start using this PowerPoint.
I'm Hanan Zbiz. I'm a Tunisian journalist, but since 1 year I'm established in Kurdistan, in Iraq. I arrived 1 month before the fall of Mosul into the hands of ISIS, and I was witnesses of all what happens after. I access my work as investigative journalism on the problem of the Yazidi girls who was kidnapped, sold, and raped by ISIS and then liberated. So I'm going to speak about that in this session, and I'm open to all your questions. Okay. Don't you? Excuse me. So let's recall a little bit of historical background. We know in the 10th of June in 2014, Daesh take Mosul. In the summer 2014, Daesh attacked and took a number of cities and villages in North Iraq around KRG and arrived near Erbil. And especially in the 3rd of August 2014, Daesh attacked Sinjar, North Iraq, and it is a region where almost Yazidi community lives, and take almost 3,000 to 4,000 of girls, slaves, and kill thousands of men. So the stories start in this date, so sad date, 3rd of August, and the catastrophe of Yazidi girls start in this day. A lot of people there escaped to the mountain of Sinjar. others cannot escape, and they were taken by Daesh. Daesh almost kill all the men and take all the women, then divide the married woman and the young girl, and took them to different places, so especially to Mosul, Tel Afar, Anbar, Fallujah, but also outside of Iraq, in Syria, Raqqa, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia. And normally he put them in houses, then the fighters came to see them and to choose one or more to take in with them. The ages of the girls who was taken, we get children that have the age from 9 to 17 years old, young girls, not married, young married women, and even women with children. And they were hit, tortured, raped, obliged to change their religion, threatened to be killed, and purchased and sold. I want to make a quick recall of why they are attacking the Yazidi people. Because the Yazidi people, they are not Muslims, they are not Christian, and they are not Jewish, so they are considered by ISIS as kuffar, so misbeliever. And so the Sharia allowed them to kill them and to make their women as slaves. So those are some pictures of the Yazidi girls who was liberated. And then I will speak about how they was liberated. A lot of picture was taken in the camps where they are living. Almost of them, they are living, actually. So I'm going to speak about the prices that they were used to sell those girls. So according to a document published by ISIS, you have different categories of girls. So as you say, there is girls under 9 years old, women between 10 and 20, women between 20 and 13 years old. And we know that Daesh fighters preferred the young girls, the kids. Daesh published another document in the period of October-November, I remember, to explain how to treat female slaves, especially the little girls, so the kids. So before speaking about how they were liberated, I want to speak about my methodology to reach those girls. So in the beginning, there was a lot of difficulty to arrive to those girls that start to be liberated by some activists, Yazidi activists, and local NGOs. And the problem was in the beginning how to reach them because the subject was taboo. Second problem was that a lot of them fear to speak with media because their family are still with ISIS. And some local media, Kurdish media, made a lot of big mistakes that harmed them and harmed their families. I remember that Rudawi is the first Kurdish TV called one of the Yazidi girls who was under ISIS and put her in direct on TV speaking. And this was so harmful for her and for the other girls. So to reach those girls, it was needed to go through activists and NGOs. Second problem was how to make them speak about the rape, because almost all of them told you about their story, but never said that they was raped because something is taboo in their society, very conservative Yazidi society. So you have stories like, yes, I wasn't raped, by my friend was raped, or I was in the room, but I listened that they were screaming in the next room because there was girl that they taken. But almost of the girls who were liberated are raped. It was difficult to make them to speak about that, but through some NGOs, some experts that are treating them, some psychiatric doctors, we can get some details about this point. How to get information about Daesh in this question? So, as I said before, ISIS published a lot of documents through its Twitter account. So you need to make to put on Twitter Wilayat Nainawa or Wilayat Anbar. So it's to make the region in Iraq, and you find all the information that are published regularly by ISIS in this part of Iraq. And then you have the review of ISIS, the Dabbagh review, obviously, where they put all the press release, all the information that they want to communicate to their people. I use, obviously, the testimony of the victims and the testimony of the smugglers, because why the testimony of the smugglers? When I started to see those girls and to speak about them, to know how they were liberated, all of them spoke about the same scenario. I was alone in a house, and then I get out, and then I found someone who helped me, and then I came back to KRG. But the thing that I discovered that they were, they received the sustain. They were helped by smugglers, and those smugglers have relationship with some local AZD NGOs. These local AZD NGOs take contact with this smuggler. This smuggler goes to the point where this girl is. These girls previously call the NGOs or her family saying that I'm in this place, in this house, and then the smuggler come, take her, put her in another house, safe house, and in this house he bring her a false ID and a total hijab, and then bring some of his families, put her in a taxi, and they get out from the region taken by ISIS. The thing I discovered here that it became a real business for the smugglers, because to liberate one of the, each girl was liberated for the sum of $4,000. And those smugglers are almost the Arab tribes who has alliance with ISIS and has good relationship. So let me return to the prices that they were practicing, those smugglers, to liberate those girls. So till now they liberate 2,600 girls. So the cost in average is $4,000 for each girl. So you have to pay between $1,000 to $2,000 to the smugglers who are gonna who go to ISIS and buy the girls, because they are not allowed to say that I'm going to liberate her. So they go to ISIS and they're saying, okay, I'm going to buy her. So you need to pay $100 to $2,000. Then between $1,200 to $1,300 to the taxi who's gonna transport her from the ISIS area to outside, and $215 for to have the false identity, and $150 to have the niqab. The point that thanks to this procedure, even if it becomes a real business, it is the only way to get those girls out, and many of them succeed to get out. And even if ISIS doesn't allow them to have cell phone, some of them hide their cell phone in some place and succeed to have contact with those NGOs and with those families. I'm going to show a video of...
No, let's wait with it.
No?
No.
Not now?
No.
Okay. So later I'm going to show a video of one girl who was liberated, and she speaks about that. Now let's speak about what happens after the liberation. So in the beginning, a lot of those girls didn't want to escape because they were afraid to be killed when they come back to their community. In Yazidi religion, someone who get out from the religion, so you know that those Yazidi girls was obliged to be Muslim. So in the Yazidi religion, if you get out from the religion, you cannot come back. So a lot of those girls feel that they are going to be killed if they come back. So for the first time in their history, their holy reference or their holy chief makes something like a fatwa saying that those girls are victims and we need to welcome them, and you don't have to harm them and to accuse them and to do nothing to them. You have to welcome them. They are our girls, and they were obliged to change their religion and and they were raped. It was not their choice. So a lot of them start to come back, but when they come back, even if some families were so happy to get their girls back, the society cannot understand and cannot accept to have those girls who was raped. So a lot of them suffer from social pressure, they have psychological problems, and they need to be treated. A sanitary service were established in the Hock, which is the main city in Kurdistan, that help to treat them. So the first step when a girl comes back, first she go to a court, like an establishment like a court. It's an office, not a court. It's an office for genocide. It is to archive her story in order, after that, to make a process and to present it to the international court. Second step, she went to this center, sanitary center, so she had tests to see if she's pregnant, if she has viruses, she has sexual problems, and then to see if she need to be psychiatrically treated. So a lot of them have this process, but it is a long process because they still remember what happens to them. They are living in very difficult situation in the camps. The society cannot forgive the fact that they was raped and sexually attacked. So the government and some NGOs try to help them, to integrate them in society another time, to find activities to them, to make training to them, to receive some of them in some shelters, to protect them if their families doesn't accept them. And we got the problem of some of them were pregnant. So another subject which is taboo, an NGO representative told me a story about one woman who was pregnant and she cannot abort. So she went to Turkey in order to deliver her child, and she didn't want to get it back. So she left it there saying, I don't want to have Daesh child, and she came back. Other girls abort. Some girls want to have an operation to reestablish their virginity. Some of the parents of those girls took them, obliged them to go to the hospital to see if they are virgin or not, if they are pregnant or not. So they are facing a very difficult situation after they're coming back. I discover also that PKK is using their situation to recruit them and to make them fight with PKK guerrilla. So when I visit the PKK places in Sinjar, I found they create new forces, women forces for Yazidi girls, and I discovered that there was very young persons. You have girls of 16, 17 years old who was trained, and they start to fight. So PKK are using them, saying that we're liberating them, so we give you the chance to avenge yourself and your family, and then it recruit them. Okay. The final thing is that now there are actually a program with Germany to take 100 of those Yazidi girls to Germany to be treated by the end of these years. This program is going well, so it gives them the possibility to be treated during two years, and then they decide if they want to come back to Iraq or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanan. That was, thank you.
Video. No? Okay.
You know that these seminars are being streamed online, and I think we should avoid because it's not clear if this girl can actually go public with her face, you told me before. So I think we don't need to screen the video of this girl that was liberated. So now we know the victims of Daesh. Of course, this is a really interesting story and all the nuances that you're providing us. I think we should move on to the next member of our panel, if we can. Joachim Medin, Swedish journalist, freelance. Let me just remind you, so everyone know where we're talking about. Here are the Yazidi girls, Hanan, outside Sinjar, right? The mountain is around this area.
Around Sinjar, yes.
So now we will move to a place called Ain al-Arab, but now mostly people know this town as Kobani. Joachim, can you please tell us about your work? Because you've been focusing a lot throughout the entire region, but specifically Kobani was one of the places that you've been reporting.
Yeah, one of the places. Yeah. So, if you can keep the map, actually, just a few seconds. So this about a month ago, I came back after spending.
This is Kobani, yeah, over here. I know a lot of. Sorry.
Yes, it is. I spent 7 weeks this summer in the entire region between, well, these two rivers, the Euphrates and Tigris, to report about the advancement of the Kurdish forces, of course, being backed up by the international coalition, how they were fighting the Islamic State forces, the humanitarian situation, the refugee crisis, both of the people leaving the area and the internal crisis. And this was my last trip to Syria, and I've been there on a number of occasions to report about this situation, both inside Syria and the border areas. And this is a photo from September 2014, just outside of the city of Kobani, when I just by chance became the last international journalist inside the city. Just 2 or 3 days before the Islamic State were able to penetrate the defense and enter the city. And we know that this struggle that continued until January made the whole Kurdish situation in northern Syria really famous as well. Now, so the movie. This is just a short clip to show.
Sorry, here.
Yeah, to show the kind of weapons that we found in Kobani when I was back again in December, when they were still fighting on. Yeah, when the Kurdish forces were fighting against the Islamic State on the streets of Kobani. They were only pushed out the very last days of January. And this was in December 2014. We saw in, I don't know if you actually noticed it, you see it in a still photo, but of all these weapons, there was also a box with American painkillers And you would assume that having something American would be very against the official propaganda of the Islamic State, of course, but also to actually have painkillers or anything else that they deem to be haram in their official propaganda. So what I've been doing is to try to, among many things, to uncover actually the hypocrisy of the state that they are actually de facto building and finding traces of this. So was it the day, I said the day before or after, I don't know, maybe the day after this, we found all these weapons. I was visiting the southern front, which was inside the city of Kobani at that point. And I was interviewing one of the Kurdish commanders of the guerrilla about how the fight was going, etc. And when I was leaving, they just mentioned that, oh, by the way, we just made a successful operation just this morning, just an hour ago or something. And we killed this local military leader, an emir, called Emir Abu Zahra. And he had some things. Would you like to show it? Us to show it? And sure, I said. And they came back and they showed this to me. And what you see in this picture is a traditional dagger. And I opened it up, and there was no blood. It only said "made in China." It was very ironic. There was also one of these Dell rugged super laptops. I mean, they're about $4,000, this model, at least back then, to buy. An extremely expensive computer owned by a local military leader, commanding about 30 or 40 soldiers at the very front in Kobani, which makes you wonder what kind of equipment they have, I mean, a bit further back inside the territory. And on this laptop, you also see a huge bag of a white substance, a white powdery substance. And I found out that this was a huge bag of cocaine used by the Islamic State forces, of course. Drugs have been used by a lot of military forces in many wars. And Syria in December is a cold place where there was no electricity. So of course people also use drugs in Islamic State, and it's totally against the official picture they want to show of themselves, the official image.
Yeah, maybe we will come back to the methodology, how you're working in the region. Or do you want to show some?
Sure, I will. Just a few more photos, I guess, to show what I've been seeing. There. There's also a picture from the front line, the southern front line. And I actually met the very same commander that I interviewed when I found the cocaine. He was also in charge of this front line. This is a field outside of the city Sirin. 24 hours the city was taken by Kurdish forces from the Islamic State. I was able, as the only foreign journalist there, because this was in the next to the river Euphrates, south of Kobani, where there were no foreign journalists at all this summer. Or very, very few at least at this point. There was no one else. And I was able to visit this city 24 hours it was, after it was taken by the Kurdish forces. And I found a lot of objects, obviously, because this city was still untouched by any destruction or anger that the Kurdish forces, of course, they tend to destroy many things because of anger, because of their friends and relatives being killed. We found all of these weapons. And I also managed to get photos of the locally produced rockets being produced by the Islamic State. You can still see the welding, as you see. The quality might not be the best, but they were fully capable of killing people. And it was really interesting to make these discoveries and to find yet again things that show the hypocrisy of this state they are actually building. But when you find things in the propaganda videos of the Islamic State, they, for example, have been they've been smashing up bottles of whiskey and alcohol to show that there should be no whiskey or alcohol at all in the state we are building. They've also been burning pharmaceutical drugs in their propaganda videos to show that this is haram and against all that is Sharia. Yet at the front line, you tend to find these things everywhere. And these are from the front line by the Islamic State. And these are just painkillers, basically. Yet they go against the official picture they want to show of themselves. And there's been a lot of discoveries like this, which I can also bring up after we continue.
Yeah. So we will come back and discuss, of course, more how you can get access to this area, since you're one of the few Western journalists that stayed for a very long time in the region. But first, Rana, let's go back and talk to, let's see, where is this? Here. Rana, you're the director of ARIJ. And I'm curious because, you know, as the director of ARIJ, can you tell us about what you're doing in Amman, and also, of course, how do you see the possibilities of actually reporting about Daesh? How do you instruct people that you're training, and when you follow them in their career? What's your take on this?
First of all, thank you for allowing me to be here. And I'd like to call on all members of Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism to stand up and introduce yourselves, please. معلش الأريجيين كلهم يوقفوا? Okay, this is the first time Arab journalists, we are around 24 journalists here. I remember the first conference, I went to a global conference, we were 3 journalists, and everyone was mocking us and saying, haha, Arab journalists doing investigative reporting. Today, thank you. Today we are 24 people, and I wish I could invite every one of them to come and share their brave stories. So as some of you might know, our organization is funded by Sweden, Denmark, Norway, so thank you very much. And by Open Society Foundation, what we do normally is we encourage brave journalists to come to us, and we train them on a manual we have developed with international experts. We provide a coach, and we pay the full funding of that investigation, and we assign a legal lawyer. So far, we have published 350 investigations, and everyone has led to change in its respective society. We're operating in 9 Arab countries, starting in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, then Egypt, then Bahrain, Yemen, Tunisia, Iraq, Palestine, and Yemen. And as you can see, it's a wide range of countries. The operation is in Amman, but we have coaches and we have journalists and trainers in every Arab country, so we're very much a diversified network. So thank you for inviting me to talk today. Extremism is not just practiced by ISIS. ISIS might be the most repulsive because of the way they are killing people and burning them alive. But I think extremism is also happening from governments that we operate under. Extremism is happening from society. Extremism is happening in the name of religion. Extremism is happening from chief editors against their journalists. So, you know, ISIS stands out, but everyone else does it on a different degree. So I'd like to take a few examples of how we are still surviving. And let me just start by talking about Syria and how we are working there. In November, I met and trained a group of Syrian exile journalists in Istanbul. We have 2 of them with us today. One was lucky enough, he got on these death boats and he made it to Germany. Is Basil here? Basil, can you stand, please? Let's congratulate Basil for making it safe to Germany. We have Firas Fayyad, a filmmaker that was jailed by Bashar Assad's regime before he fled to Turkey. There he is. And there's a 3rd journalist whose story until now gives me the goosebumps. That journalist was jailed in Damascus. He was taken to the intelligence. His task was to basically take every individual that has been tortured to death by the executioners, to take them to a bathroom that was turned into a morgue. So this guy had to carry the corpses that were broken like this. They used to lie them on their bellies, and then they would put an iron rod and they would close them like this, and they would crack their backs. So this guy used to carry every day around 7 bodies to that toilet, and then in the morning, a truck would come and take all these bodies to be taken to the mass graves. And he told me that one morning, while he was dishing away one of the bodies, the guy's soul hasn't left him. He told him, please don't do this to me. And the guard was telling him, if you don't do it, you're going to be next. The guy told me that the dead people had no humanity because in that bathroom, they used to piss on the bodies because the prisoners had to piss. In the rooms, they were like 4 meters by 4 meters, and the prisoners had to sit back to back. They couldn't even stretch their necks. So for me, it's a miracle that someone like Basil, someone like Firas, someone like our colleague Sasha, have survived without any traumatic treatment. If this was in the West, I'm sure your organizations would have provided you with the top psychological support. And these guys haven't had any psychological support from this trauma. So I really salute them. We have 2 journalists. Before we talk about that, we just lost a cameraman in the ISIS territories. He was filming with hidden cameras because today you cannot film if you don't use hidden cameras, mostly mobiles. So some of his colleagues betrayed him, and they told ISIS that this journalist is here, filming schools and the curriculum at the ISIS schools. So he was arrested, and he was interrogated, and he gave away the names of the 2 colleagues that were involved in that story. We can't talk about the names because one of them is still living there, but now at least we know that this journalist can be in danger because they know exactly how to get him. One lives in Turkey, but Turkey is also not safe anymore because ISIS is a state. It has intelligence, a very powerful intelligence service, because most of the hardcore supporters were ex-Baathists and ex-Syrian intelligence people, and they know exactly how these countries operate and how intelligence operates. So even those that are staying in Turkey today are at the mercy of ISIS that can reach them anywhere. They're also at the mercy of the Turkish government that can expel them whenever they are no longer welcome. To go again, working under the Syrian regime is not any easier, because there, if they see you in the street with a mobile camera, you can become an enemy of the state and you can be jailed. Operating under the liberated territory, where you have a mix of secular opposition and a mix of moderate Islamists, things aren't any better, but people there haven't lost the spirit of the revolution, so the government has to think twice before it cracks down on these journalists. We have just published a very good investigation. It's ready to go out on the 18th of October. It's about 2 journalists operating in ISIS land and in Kurdistan and in the Syrian regime's territory and in the opposition areas. And they took the text school books of grade 1 to 3, and they were able to show how these little kids are being indoctrinated with the ideology of the four parties. This is going to come out soon, but one of the 2 reporters, we will have his name as it is, and the other one will have a pseudonym. So that's a new thing now. We are publishing under pseudonyms. Now, let me go to what is happening in Yemen. And do we have Wahib here? Do we have Nawal here? Okay. We have 2 Yemenis. One is based in London, and one can no longer go back to Yemen. He's now based in Cairo. Well, Yemen isn't any better. It's today in the arms of the Houthis, who have actually banned journalists from traveling. So in your passport, if it says journalist, you cannot travel unless you get approval. So today, many of our journalists have changed their occupations into either a public civil servant or a businessman, or gotten diplomatic passports. The Houthis today have sent home 400 journalists who happen to be working in the previous government-led media because they are seen as pro-regime. There are 55 of our journalist colleagues kidnapped, and 15 are basically lost. We know nothing about them. But despite that, we still have 5 journalists that are working with us, and we are telling them today, you do not risk your life, but all you can do is basically collect the data of all the atrocities the collateral damage, the people that have no hospitals, the people that have been maimed, whatever is happening, the smuggling of kerosene, the abuse by the Houthis. But that doesn't mean that the previous government or the legitimate government was not practicing abuses, because governments aren't saints. But of course, it's all, with varying degrees. We talk about Egypt today. Egypt has descended into a moral graveyard of journalists. It's not enough. Sometimes it's better to die than to be broken by a government, broken by torture, broken. Your soul is broken by intimidation. Today in Egypt, the worst thing that has happened is that there are 61 jailed journalists since the new leadership took over. Some of them have been jailed because they were arrested for not having an official document issued by the press syndication that clearly says you're a journalist. So in Egypt and in Jordan, if you don't belong to that privileged club of loyal journalists, you cannot call yourself a journalist. You will be at the mercy of breaking the law and being an impersonator. So some of the 61 people have been jailed because of activism, because some of them were covering unrest and they got stopped and filmed. Other people because of their political views, because they happen to be supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. In Egypt today, you cannot report on the major anti-jihadist operation taking part, led by the government in the Sinai Peninsula. Even the foreign journalists there, the foreign correspondents, have been summoned by the Ministry of Interior and warned that if they do not follow the official line and use the official texts, they will be also expelled and their official accreditation might be withdrawn. You have the chief editors of the private media. 99.99% of them have all given their loyalty on a plate of gold to the government. They have said, we will not investigate atrocities, we will not investigate human rights abuses, you are great and keep on doing your job. We have chief editors that are breaking the souls of their reporters every day by banning them from reporting or telling them what to write. And the journalists sometimes tell me, we feel like we have become, I don't want to use a bad word, but we feel sometimes we have become like, when you go and pay to get a service, we have become like that. We have to say what they want us to say. The few independents are leaving, and now there's a group of colleagues that is planning to set up an independent caucus, and we are looking at supporting them. There is a new anti-terror law in Egypt, in Jordan, in Tunisia, in Bahrain, and in Saudi Arabia. And under this very funny law, if I criticize an Arab country as a journalist, I could end up in jail because I'm basically harming friendly relations with a friendly Arab state. So Jordan, for example, in the last few months, it's not any better from Egypt, but it's a much smaller scale. And of course, we don't have a lot of journalists in jail. But 4 of my colleagues have been taken to jail because they criticized the war on Yemen or they criticized Saudi Arabia. One member of parliament, former member of parliament, was put in jail for 3 years because he criticized the United Arab Emirates for banning the Muslim Brotherhood. So today, people are being followed if they do posts on Facebook, if they do posts on Twitter, and this is unprecedented. This all started in the last 2 years. Mostly, chief editors are in bed with the authorities, and they're just thinking of their interests and staying in the laps of these officials instead of just having loyalty to their readers and to their public. Let me talk about some brightness amid all this gloom. Let's talk about Tunis. I was there last week. The good news is that the government today will never ever call a journalist and tell him, don't write this, because hell will break loose. Tunis has a very active and vibrant civil society. It has a very active union of professions, and the journalists will basically speak out and they will slander the guy that is giving orders. But the biggest enemy for Tunisia, for Tunisian media and freedom today, is the media itself, because the private media today is in the hands of businessmen, politicians, and wannabe politicians. So it's either pro-Muslim Brotherhood, pro-Nahda, or it's pro-Nida party, which is the ruling party. And the problem is a lot of journalists, you can easily buy them because the economic situation is so bad. So anybody can go in and say, I would like to buy this newspaper, or I would like to basically have this guy on my side. So, you know, with a little money, it's easy to take over. But you still have some brave journalists. And the funny thing, too, is that the state-run TV station is producing the most neutral and objective news bulletin. Can you imagine that? I mean, 4 years ago, it was the mouthpiece of Ben Ali. And today, it's the public broadcasting. It's a proper service of public broadcasting. Let's also talk about society's oppression. For example, in Jordan, years ago, we investigated a story about the abuse of mentally handicapped by their caregivers. The journalist herself was wearing a hijab, and we did this investigation together with BBC Arabic. After we broadcast it in Jordan, the king went mad because he saw how these kids were being abused sexually, mentally, physically, emotionally. Some of them had arms and limbs broken. But you know what the first reaction came? You are trying to slander your country by showing this on BBC World, you know, BBC Arabic. You're trying to show that in Jordan people have no manners and no religion. And another trend said, you know, you're trying to basically slam the Islamists because every woman you show in that film is a veiled woman. And you have an agenda because you are foreign funded and you're trying to show that Islam is a bad religion. So, you know, we laughed at this point and we said Islam, in fact, tells you to show mercy with these people. And if it happens that the caregivers were all veiled, you know, that's not our problem because the journalist herself was veiled. And then we talk about journalists bullying each other, and that's the worst form of breaking each other up. So instead of supporting each other, you have everyone climbing on everyone's back and everyone trying to please the master's voice, whether it's in that direction or in that direction. And then the last thing is the oppression that is practiced in the name of God and religion. If today you report about calls on banning a cultural festival, you know, we've had a festival in Jordan of culture and arts, and the Islamists wanted to ban it because it's allowing people to shake their bellies, and this is un-Islamic, we don't need this, it's a shame. Syria next door is having war, so we should all die, you know. And if you attack this, they will automatically tell you, but you are going against the values of our society. You're going against Islamic values of society. And who said, you know, who decides what the morality is and who decides what the values are? So in a nutshell, to go back, it's a very interesting theme that we are talking about today. Of course, ISIS is ugly because they have this amazing multimedia, high-tech productions of their executions, but the amount of oppression and breaking of souls that's going on, that's not on film, is as equally bad. Thank you.
Thank you, Rana. The Arab Spring definitely turned into winter. It's really sad to hear about the situation for our colleagues in the Middle East. Let's talk about the mythology a little bit, because although it is extremely difficult to work throughout the different countries of the Middle East, Joachim, the value of being on the ground as an investigative reporter, I know that you brought these things, like why is it important to, you know, stay like you did, to enter Kobani just when they were kicked out, Daesh, for example? And second of all, how do you do it? Do you have any kind of advice? Because, you know, our colleagues, the Arab colleagues in the Middle East, of course, they're facing, like we just heard, terrible consequences. As foreign journalists, we might be targeted because if we're kidnapped, they can benefit politically or financially. But on the other hand, people coming from Europe, from Sweden, for example, reporting about ISIS, you can have a serious impact because people trust, at least they tend to trust Western journalists more than local journalists in a way. So can you tell us how do you get to these places, and why do you do it? Why is it so important for you?
Well, I mean, I suppose there's a number of reasons why it's important to report from a war zone, not least the humanitarian aspect. But when it comes to this question, I mean,
but for example, when you find this computer,
yeah, which I couldn't open, by the way, it was locked. I mean, this is, in a way, I mean, proof of... you can speculate all you want about what kind of technology they actually have, these people, and whether or not they are using drugs, their fighters. We tend to hear all these rumors. But if you go there yourself and you find proof of it, then it really becomes so much more interesting. You can speculate all you want about whether or not these like Dabiq, for example, like these like propaganda texts and so on that they publish online in English. I mean, are the people actually seeing this themselves? And I've been collecting stuff from the front lines. I mean, about women and jihad. I mean, yes. Public rules that you're supposed to oblige to.
So this is actually from ISIS directly?
Yeah. And it was interesting because this is really, really super interesting to read. Women and jihad, about what they think about... Oh, sorry. What they think about...
it's the role of women.
The role of women. But also, I mean, the fact that the owner of this pamphlet tore away a piece of it to write a shopping list. That's also super interesting because this isn't really important in that case. So, yeah.
But do you feel that your stories are any different than people interviewing from Skype, calling, activists in the area, for example? Why is it so important for you to actually come back to Sweden with this stuff from ISIS?
Well, for one thing, because when you lecture about this, that I do a lot in Sweden, when you actually bring back physical objects and you're able to show them, people get a lot more interested and they realize that this is for real. I mean, what kind of life do people actually live under the Islamic State? And I brought this with me. I mean, a poster with the Sharia laws that you are supposed to live under, or if you don't, then you are sentenced or executed in a number of fashions. And they show this.
It talks about homosexuality and the limits of homosexuality.
Yeah, and you will get thrown off a roof, and they actually show this as good
the
teachers.
Limits of polygamy, the limits of cursing God, or blasphemy.
So Joachim, do you feel that because there's so much reporting about ISIS or Daesh throughout the press in Europe, do you feel that being on the ground, are editing responding to that? Are you getting access to publish your things since you physically, get in touch with ISIS almost, or as close as possible?
Well, that depends on what country you try to publish in. I mean, my experience as a Swedish journalist is that it tends to be a lot easier to publish in other countries than in my own country, in my own language. Because in Sweden we have something called, at least among a few media companies, we have something called the Syria policy. Syrian policy in Swedish. So I've been, I mean...
What does it mean, the Syrian policy?
Well, but I've been corresponding with a number of media companies, radio, TV, news bureaus, papers, magazines. I got all of this stuff, or I at least got photos of it. I got testimonies, I got stories, interviews, you name it. Would you like to have stories about this? And they said that's really interesting, but no. Because we have a Syria policy, which means that we cannot take responsibility if something should happen to you. So we will not buy any freelance material. Of course, they will still buy it from the AFP or some international news bureau, but not from a Swedish journalist going to this area, or any other journalist.
You told me, for example, you were in Kobani in contact with major Swedish media outlets.
Yeah.
And they told you, we can get your stuff if you get out of Kobani. Once you cross the border, you can transmit your material.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes they tell you that we're really interested, but you have to leave Syria. Then you can send it to us. So please leave Syria now. Don't stay and continue your work. Other times they tell me that please feel free to tell us everything that you've seen and you've heard, but we will make this into an interview and you will not get paid, of course. So it's difficult, even if you find all this stuff and it's really interesting to publish about it.
Okay, so let's move on to the method. We're having short time here left. What about how can we, it sounds almost impossible, you know, for example, in Sweden, you know, you're stopped from being published if you're actually on the ground. And Rana, the description you gave is terrible. Like, what kind of method are we supposed to use if we really want good reporting on Daesh?
What we're doing in ARIJ, can we please show the website of ARIJ? We're using pseudonyms. This is a new habit, but if this saves lives, you know, why not? Our journalists are more keen on getting the story out than, you know, being the heroes. We've used that in Iraq on a story involving Nouri al-Maliki, the former prime minister. As he was running for re-election, he was using perks and privileges to win votes. We've used that in a Swiss leaks investigation following the money of Bashar Assad's maternal family, and we had to use a pseudonym as well. We were doing that a lot in Syria, and probably very soon in Jordan and in Egypt. We're also collaborating with foreign media because it's sometimes very important to divide and to support each other and to divide the jobs that we can do and they can do. We're, of course, in constant contact with international human rights groups and media activists and foreign embassies. We're also using encrypted mails and other forms of, you know, diverting attention from the electronic surveillance, but we know that we are there. Sometimes even journalists spy on each other, you know, so it's part of the culture. So it's not just the government spying on you, it's sometimes your own colleagues spying on you. We also are using a lot of hidden cameras, and we're just doing this for documentation in ISIS areas. We have a very brave journalist with us. Is Mashab here? Mashab? Can you see this guy? Okay, this is Mashab. He's the nightmare for Jordan's press, for Jordan's information officer, because this guy single-handedly in the last 3 years has sued the Minister of Interior and the Minister of Justice 3 times for withholding information. But he himself, in the last 10 years since Jordan had the Freedom to Access Information law, we've had 27 protests against the Council of Information not giving information. Out of these 27 counts, this guy alone has complained 17 times. So it's 17 out of 27. So this is the guy that can make change. These are the guys that can make change, you know, the guys that are willing to risk it till the end, of course. We also do risk assessment, and sometimes we contact foreign colleagues to get their advice. Thank you for helping us. All of you have helped us. We insist on documentation. Every journalist that works with us has to document whatever word he writes. It has to be supported by a document. Even if we go to court, let's make it difficult for them to break us. We also have the legal review, and this is very important. And if the lawyer says you need to do this and that, we obey his orders. And that's why from our 350 investigations so far, you know, we have not had one litigation at court. But I see this coming in the future. We also insist on confronting the culprits, the ministers that are responsible for the failures, society, the citizens, etc. We also try to tell journalists in ISIS areas, in Yemen, in Egypt, you know, it's not important to report today on the story. Try to collect all the nuggets, and we can always tell the story later on. But try to collect the data, because your weapon is the data. And of course, we encourage them to be ethically correct, because if you want to investigate people, you have to be clean yourself.
One aspect of reporting about Daesh, for example, is that they're very good at propaganda. How do you feel about that? Like, are you part of that? Do you become part of that propaganda? Because it serves a purpose to actually do some reporting. How do you feel about that, Joachim, for example?
Okay. Well, I've been accused writing about the Islamic State that I am actually, in a way, supporting them. I mean, I've been writing, for example, this summer I was writing about visiting this newly conquered city and finding all of these traces, public art, lots of documentation from the administration and bureaucracy of the Islamic State. And I wrote they are actually building a state. They're building their own rockets. And I was accused by people from the left and the right for supporting the Islamic State and being biased in this way. Very interesting.
What about you, Hanin? Do you feel that there is too much focus on the Yazidi girls, actually? The question is that, is it taking over? Or don't you have other things to report about in northern Iraq, for example, where you live?
Of course, there is a lot of things that need to be, and has been covered, and Joachim and other colleagues did a lot in that. But for me, it was something that was a little bit like personal, you know, because I feel I'm a woman, and I put myself in their places of those Yazidi girls, and imagine the horrible thing that they faced. Of course, they are not the only minority that was attacked by ISIS. Christian people was attacked, and other minorities. But the big number was from the Yazidi community. If you have about 4,000 girls that had been taken and that had been treated like sexual slaves, it's a lot. So for me, it was a choice from the beginning. I want to treat this problem because I feel that this problem it have a concern, special concern for me, and I wanted to documentate what happens and the atrocity that have been those girls have been treated, and how they were liberated, and how to cure them, and how to help them to return to a normal life. And you know, it's not so easy in a country like Iraq, where there is all the time you have problems, ethnical problems, wars, and so.
So we're about to finish now. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, please state your name and where you.
We need a microphone.
Yeah.
I can repeat it for you. But please ask your question.
Yeah, from Finland. I would like to ask, how should we call ISIS?
What should we call them? ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, Rana? What?
They use the word Islamic. Does it have anything to do with Islam?
I can respond to that.
Yeah. What should we call them?
The right one is ISIL, because it's تنظيم الدولة الإسلامية في العراق والشام. So it's Islamic organization in Iraq, and Sham it's Levant. It's not Syria. So the right one is ISIL. But since the media is used to use ISIS or Daesh, so we have.
Is it like, as a journalist, we have a.
You have to use the mic for streaming. So.
Yes, but
What does it? Okay. So, but what is it? Because we are, you know, we are building the word shaping the word with our words. So, what would you like to call it? Is that extremist Islamic organization, terror organization? What is it?
It's an organization that became a state, a real state, because if you see what they are building in Syria and Iraq, they have enormous state with institutions, with ministries, with courts, with everything that you can imagine in a state, and they have resource of financement, and they have offices. So I think that you can call it a state.
Yeah, I must agree. I mean, they even have public workers tending to take care of parks and trees and things. I mean, they are actually building a state, you know, succeeding doing so. So the word terrorist is a really tired word by now. So let's call it instead extremist states maybe.
So we have one more question. Please state your name.
I would probably go for the so-called ISIS, so-called Islamic State. I mean, unfortunately, what they're doing is a very strict interpretation of Islam. It does have roots in Islam. But, you know, we shouldn't, like, pretend as if they're not doing this because they are Islamic. They are actually hijacking religion. So maybe the best thing would be just to call it the so-called.
Yes, we have one more. Please state your name as well.
My name is Maria, and I work for Reuters in Moscow. My question is about Russian airstrikes. It probably comes too early because they have just begun. But is there any way now or a little bit later to assess damage from those airstrikes, to count, to assess the number of casualties? Are you receiving this information now?
Actually, contacting Yemen is not reliable. The question was to me on Yemen?
No, no,
The Russian bombardments.
airstrikes.
The Russian bombardment in Syria.
No, we're not following the Russian airstrikes.
No. Your question is if it's possible to assess this, the consequences.
I'm talking about Russian airstrikes in Syria.
Yeah.
In Syria. Is there any way to receive the information on the consequences now?
No, we don't have any journalist inside Syria that's tracking this, but I think, if you talk to Elliot Higgins, he might be able to help you with Bellingcat, the surveillance, electronic surveillance.
I do know, though, that Al Jazeera, a team from Al Jazeera was almost hit by a rocket outside of Idlib, I think.
We have one more question, please.
Yeah, my name is Florian. I'm working for the German newspaper Die Welt. I have a question regarding your trip to Kobani. How can you work as an investigative journalist when you totally rely on people for your security up there? And I mean, the Kurdish forces are coming up presenting you stuff. And how do you know that what they present you is really actual, the stuff that they found with ISIS? Like, they could present you any kind of drugs.
Very good question.
Any laptop, anything. You totally rely on them because of your security, right?
Yeah, especially in the Syrian war. I mean, there's no way of these days of going into Syria and simply freestyling. Traveling freely is impossible because you will get arrested or kidnapped or killed by someone. You need to be embedded with someone to be able to move in their territory and or to the front line. But these things, I mean, well, the drugs were presented to me because they just came back from this clash with 200 or 300 meters away. But the other things I've found them myself in territory that was just taken from the Islamic State. So they haven't been presented to me. But of course, if they are simply giving things to you, please, we found this report of it. I do know that some journalists, having gone to northern Syria recently, they've been given stuff. Here's a driver license from the Islamic State. Here's some documents. Please write about this, and they do.
So how many
because
sources?
They haven't been
how many
fortunate
sources
enough to find them themselves.
Joachim, how many sources do you need? And because you work, like we said, with Kurdish activists or militants, for example. But how many different sources do you prefer in order to tell your stories?
Well, I mean, as much as possible, I've also been trying to make interviews with refugees, Kurds, Arabs, even a few Christians coming from the areas under control by the Islamic State, and to simply ask them, what have you been seeing? What have you been experiencing? What did you see and hear? And if you find, if people claim things then continuously, then you actually come to the conclusion that it might be right. So I've interviewed, for example, the last refugees to leave Raqqa in June. I met them in August, and they all told the same stuff, and I interviewed them in various locations. So I was able to think that it was probably true.
We have one final question here, please.
Yeah. My name is Abir Sadi. I'm a journalist, an Egyptian journalist, a war correspondent, and I know ISIS. I've seen them several times. They killed two of my best friends, and they broke my leg. So this is how I know them. And of course, I like what you're doing about it. I want you just to go ahead and doing it because it exposes them. The thing about the propaganda thing, it's don't repeat their videos because this is part of the propaganda, but the way you do investigative reporting is good. But I have just a little comment, and it comes because I've just finished my master's and I got my results about it. It was by the propaganda of ISIS and the videos. They are not a state under anything. They are under a social movement theory. They have been classified under this movement theory, and they are radical groups, and believe it or not, they are a social movement. And it is not a state, it's a militia. Syria now is a failed state, so there are militias there, and they try to be a state. So let's say that self-proclaimed ISIS, this is going to be better than saying that they are a state. They are not state. They claim.
you want to answer her?
Yeah, but could we talk about a state building process? I mean, at least, because the stuff that I've seen when you actually go to visit the areas, they've just been under their control. You find things like public art. You find governmental offices. You find a lot of things that you won't even find in so-called failed states. So this is for real a process of building a state, at least.
I've done a whole research designing that, and it goes under the social movement.
Okay, so Hannah, you say.
I want to say something. When I say state, it's not something that I like to say, but it's real estate. Because the information that we are getting from people that are still in Mosul, and we can contact sometimes with Viber or with the phone, they are telling us that they, at least at Mosul, it's real estate. They have offices, they have government, they have municipalities, they have people that are working in that. Recently, now, you know that they are, the school are opening, so Daesh are changing the whole pedagogic programs to those kids, so they started to learn them how to make jihad and other things. So believe me, they are very well organized. They took in fact, what they did in Mosul, they took all the administrative instance that used to existed in the Iraqi government, and they transformed them.
Same in Syria.
Yes, but they keep the structure, so it's working like state.
Okay, so we have a very last question in the back, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I have a question
Please
for...
state your name so we know who's talking.
Laura from Italy. I work for a crowdfunding project. We send reporters in countries with conflicts. And we are trying to go to Kobane now. We tried to go to Kobane, but we couldn't make it. So first I wanted to ask Joachim if he thinks that there is any possibility to access the city now. And also another question, it's really brief, really, about the laptop, the cocaine, all this stuff. You were saying that it's a sign of the hypocritical, propaganda of ISIS, but also, were you asking yourself, where is this stuff coming from? So how is ISIS getting it? Where does it come from?
I mean, accessing Kobane has been really difficult for a few years now, because the Turkish government militarized the border already back in 2012, which means that all of us who've been wanting to visit Kobane have been forced to cross the border illegally. That's why I've been arrested and been put to prison in Turkey. So you either have to cross it illegally from Turkey, or you go from the Kurdish area in northern Iraq into Syria, which is also illegally according to the Syrian government. The second question, where they got it from? I mean, I was shocked, obviously, but at the same time, I mean, actually, around the same day, I remember this was maybe the 22nd, 23rd of December that we found this laptop. On the 24th of December, we did our best to try to sneak around the corners to see if there was any Islamic State fighters anywhere, to try to hide from them, from the snipers. At the same time, we realized after some while they were actually filming us with drones from the sky. So they have all of this equipment and all of this technology. And why? Because they have a lot of money, and they've been able to buy this, or someone been giving it to them. And the drugs, I take it it's from Nigeria, maybe. Somehow it made it to Syria. Yeah.
Or Iran.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you have any further questions, please get in touch with these people. They're here on Twitter, on Facebook, and so on. Thank you very much.